Before I tell you what she did, I need you to sit with the version of me that existed before I knew. I want you to picture something first. A stone house in the Cotswolds. A Tuesday afternoon in November. I am sitting in my car in the car park of a business center in Wolverhampton, engine off, phone in my hand, staring at nothing in particular. There is a half-eaten sandwich on the passenger seat from a petrol station forecourt. There are documents in my bag that I need to review before tomorrow. There is a client expecting a follow-up call by 4 o'clock. I am not making the call. I am sitting very still. The way water sits still right before something heavy drops into it. My name is Sophia. I am 41 years old. I run a business consultancy in Gloucestershire called Clearwater Advisory. I built it from scratch at 26 with a savings account, an overdraft I was terrified of, and the kind of stubbornness that looks like confidence from the outside. I have a partner called Jamie, who is a structural engineer and one of the most quietly decent people I have ever met. I have a house in Stroud with flagstone floors and a garden I have spent 5 years turning into something I love. From the outside, I am told, like someone who has sorted her life out. The person I have just been on the phone with, the one who said the thing I am currently trying to process in a car park in the Midlands, is my mother. Sandra, 67 years old, estate agent, retired. A woman with extremely strong opinions about property values, the correct way to load a dishwasher, and her eldest child. Her eldest child is Connor, my brother, 5 years older than me. And what my mother has just told me, in the measured logistics delivery tone she uses when a decision is already made and the call is informational rather than consultative, is that my grandmother's house in Dorset has been sold 3 months ago to fund Connor's luxury lifestyle brand, without telling me. I am going to tell you everything, not because I have resolved it cleanly or because this is the story of how I triumphed spectacularly, but because what happened across 41 years, across a family that loved me in quantities that never quite matched what was needed, is the kind of thing that deserves to be said out loud. And because the thing that came after the car park, after the conversations, after the letter, that is the part you will not see coming. Stay with me. The version of me who still called home every Sunday, who sent birthday cards with actual handwritten notes inside, who drove 5 hours down the M1 to help with a kitchen renovation that my mother decided needed doing and announced, not asked, that she needed my help with. That version of me who showed up consistently, cheerfully, who told herself that the way things were in this family was just the way things were, and that you loved people in spite of the shape of them, not because of it. That version of me found out what had happened on a Wednesday, in November, on a phone call I almost didn't answer. I almost didn't answer because the number was my mother's, and I was in the middle of a client meeting I had spent 3 weeks preparing for. I stepped out anyway because you step out for your mother, even when your mother has spent 41 years teaching you that stepping out for her is entirely different from her ever stepping out for you. She was calling to tell me something. She had rehearsed it, I could tell. Her voice had that particular quality it gets when she is delivering information she has already decided is settled, which means she is not actually calling to tell me, she is calling to inform me. The way a counsel sends a letter. Here is the decision. It is final, please note. She told me that my grandmother's house, the one in Dorset, on the edge of the village my family has lived in for 3 generations, the one with the crooked gate and the apple trees and the chest freezer in the utility room that had been there since 1987, had been sold 3 months ago. I said, sorry. She said, the solicitor finished everything up in August. It all went very smoothly. I said, Mum, what did you do with the money? And there it was, the pause. 4 seconds of silence that contained everything. That contained 30 years of my brother Connor's promises and my mother's willingness to keep believing them. That contained every time I had been told the house would be kept in the family. That contained my grandmother's handwriting on a birthday card I still have in a box. One day this will come to you, my darling. It has always been for you. 4 seconds. And then she said, Connor needed it, Sophia. He was going to lose everything. I couldn't just let that happen. My brother Connor, who had decided 2 years ago to launch a luxury lifestyle brand, handcrafted leather goods and artisan candles, and a supplementary line of cashmere throws, all branded under a name he had trademarked, and a website that cost £40,000 and a PR agency in Mayfair that cost more than my annual salary. Connor, who had told everyone family dinners, Christmas gatherings, my mother's kitchen table, that this was it. This was his moment. This was the opportunity he had always deserved. Connor, who had not asked my opinion, not because he thought I would disapprove, but because the thought of asking for my opinion simply did not occur to him, because it never had. My grandmother's house, sold, without telling me, to fund a luxury brand that had, according to every set of accounts I subsequently found out about, lost money from the day it opened. My grandmother had left that house to my mother with a clear and documented wish that it be held for me. It was not ambiguous. It was not a suggestion. It was in the letter she left alongside the will in her own handwriting, because she had known exactly what my mother would do without it in writing. She had known, and it had happened anyway. If any of this sounds familiar, if you have ever been the child in your family who showed up, did the work, kept the faith, and still somehow found yourself standing on the outside of a decision that was supposed to include you, hit subscribe right now, because this channel exists for you, and this story is not over yet. I grew up in a semi-detached house in Wiltshire, the kind of street that smells of cut grass in summer and has a neighborhood Facebook group with strong opinions about planning applications. My father, Robert, dad to me, Bob to anyone who wanted to genuinely annoy him, was a civil engineer who spent his evenings watching motorsport with the focused intensity of a man who has found his purpose. My mother, Sandra, was an estate agent. Sharp, efficient, excellent at reading rooms and managing expectations. The kind of woman who could tell you within 7 minutes of walking into a house exactly what it would sell for and what needed doing to it first. She was very good at her job. At home, the same qualities expressed themselves differently. Connor is 5 years older than me, and Connor was, in the way that some eldest sons simply are in some families, the axis around which certain things organized themselves. He was loud in a way that got him called confident. He was reckless in a way that got him called adventurous. He had charisma the way some people have a particular kind of energy that makes rooms pay attention, not because of anything they have done, but because of the way they occupy space. I was quiet, not shy, quiet. There is a difference. I observed things. I remembered things. I was good at school in a way that didn't make anyone stand up and cheer. The way Connor's football matches made my parents stand up and cheer, but that produced results steadily, reliably, the way a well-maintained piece of machinery produces results. I got a scholarship to a grammar school 20 minutes away. My parents drove me there on the first day and dropped me at the gate. My mother said, "Well done, love. Don't forget you've got Connor's orthodontist appointment Tuesday. I need you to take him. I've got a viewing." Connor was 17. His orthodontist was 10 minutes from our house. He had been to the practice 12 times already and knew exactly where it was. I was 12. I took him to the orthodontist. I came home and did my own homework and then made pasta for dinner because my parents were both late and Connor had what he described as things on, which appeared to mean he had gone to a mate's house. This is not a story about one day. It is a story about what accumulates when you have enough days like that one. My grandmother, Nonna Ruth, my mother's mother, was different. Ruth was small and deliberate and had a handshake she developed in 40 years of running a market stall, first in Exeter, and then in the village in Dorset where she eventually settled. She sold handmade pottery and second-hand books and whatever else needed selling. She had opinions about everything and was not afraid to voice them, and had, in my experience, been correct about most things she voiced opinions on. She saw me, in the specific way that certain people see you, not the performance of you, not the useful version of you, but the actual interior thing you are. When I was 9, she sat me down at her kitchen table and asked me what I wanted to be when I grew up. I said I wanted to run my own business. I didn't have a specific kind of business in mind yet. I just knew I wanted something that was mine. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she said, "Good. Don't let anyone talk you out of it." I was 9, she was 71. I did not fully understand at the time that this was a warning. I studied business at the University of Exeter, not because it was what anyone expected. Nobody in my family had strong feelings about what I studied, which was its own kind of information, but because I wanted to understand the mechanics of how things worked. Money, risk, the way organizations grow and fail, the way people make decisions under pressure, and why those decisions are often the wrong ones. I graduated with a first. My parents came to the ceremony. My mother took one photograph of me in my gown and then spent 45 minutes telling the woman next to her about Connor's upcoming promotion at the insurance company he'd been working at. I moved to Bristol, got a job at a small consultancy helping SMEs with operational strategy. Worked there for 3 years, learned everything I could, and then at 26 started my own business. I called it Clearwater Advisory. It was not glamorous. It was operational consultancy and financial strategy for small and medium businesses. The kind of work that is essential and invisible, the way plumbing is essential and invisible. Nobody throws you a party for having excellent plumbing. The building just keeps working. I worked 14-hour days for the first 18 months. I had 1 client, then 3, then 7. I subcontracted where I needed to and brought on a junior partner, Melissa, when the workload required it. I said yes to things that frightened me and delivered them anyway. By my 30th birthday, Clearwater had 8 retained clients and a revenue that made my accountant visibly pleased, which is not a common expression on accountants. I had done this, I want to be clear, without any investment from my family, without a loan, without seed money from my parents. I had done it with the money I had saved during 3 years at the consultancy, supplemented by an overdraft facility I was deeply anxious about for the first 8 months and then paid off entirely by month 11. I had done it with Melissa, who I found through a mutual contact and who was, from day one, exactly the kind of person you hope to build something alongside. Precise, honest, not afraid of the uncomfortable question. What I had not had was anybody in my family saying, "This is extraordinary. You built this from nothing." My father, to his credit, said things in his way. "Proud of you, Soph," said quietly in passing at the end of a phone call, like something he was getting away with. My mother said things like, "It's going well, is it? Good, you've always been so capable." The word capable functioning in those conversations, less as praise and more as explanation for why she didn't need to worry about me. The way you say the car's running fine and move on to other concerns. I called her on the day I signed my largest contract to date. A manufacturing firm in the Midlands, 14 months retained work, a fee that was, by any reasonable measure, something worth calling home about. She answered on the 3rd ring. I told her. She said, "That's brilliant, love, really. Listen, Connor's having a bit of a difficult time with the insurance firm. I don't know if you knew. He's thinking of leaving." I said to him, "Sophia's always doing well. Maybe she could give you some advice." I sat in my car in a car park in Bristol for a long moment. "Sure," I said. "Tell him to call me." Connor did not call me. This was not the last time my professional existence was used, in conversation with my mother, as a bridge to something concerning Connor. It was, looking back, the first time I noticed the pattern as a pattern rather than just a thing that happened. The first time I identified the specific grammar of it. Sophia is fine, therefore Sophia is a resource, therefore we discuss Sophia only in relation to what Sophia can do for someone else. Fine. Fine children. Fine adults. I was 30 years old and I was still the footnote. I met Jamie at a conference in Manchester. Not the kind of meeting that makes a good story, no dramatic eye contact, no coincidence worth retelling. He was presenting a panel on supply chain sustainability. I was in the audience because I had a client with a supply chain problem, and he said something in the queue and that was so precisely correct that I wrote it down and then, when the session ended, went and told him so. He said, "Most people don't actually write things down anymore, they photograph slides." I said, "Photographs are for memories, notes are for understanding." He looked at me for a moment. Then he smiled. Our first date was dinner at a Spanish restaurant in the Northern Quarter that he had been meaning to try for a year and hadn't, because, As he put it, going to restaurants you've been meaning to try alone feels like something you should save for someone. He was thoughtful in the specific way that is not about grand gestures. He listened. Not performatively, actually listened. The kind that involves slightly tilted head and a pause before responding, because he was actually processing what you said before he replied. He asked questions that indicated he had retained what you told him the week before. His mother had died when he was 19. He spoke about her with the quiet, unembellished grief of someone who had made peace with the loss without making it smaller. I found this, the honest, undefensive way he held it, very moving. We moved in together after 8 months. Bought a house in a village outside Stroud, an old stone place with a garden that needed everything doing to it, and original flagstone floors, and a boiler that alarmed us both during the first winter before we realized it was just the way it sounded when the pressure was fine. I introduced him to my parents at a Sunday lunch in Wiltshire. My mother served a roast that was objectively excellent and asked Jamie 12 questions about his work and family background, which I recognized as the process by which she assessed people. He answered all of them with patience and openness, and at the end said something kind about the garden, which my mother has strong feelings about. On the way home, Jamie said, "Your brother doesn't ask you much, does he?" I said, "He's not curious about people in that direction." "What direction?" "Outward." Jamie glanced at me, looked back at the road. "What about your mum?" I watched the fields go past the window for a moment. "She loves me," I said. "She just doesn't know what to do with me." He said nothing, which was the right thing. Connor left the insurance company at 38. This was not, by any objective measure, a catastrophic decision. People change careers. People leave stable employment to try something new. This is human and sometimes even admirable. The manner in which Connor left, and the thing he left to do, and the way the entire family reorganized around his departure as though it were a national event requiring coordination, that is the part worth examining. He had an idea. Connor had, for as long as I could remember, specialized in ideas. Ideas had a particular quality for Connor. They were always the best idea, they were always his. And they were always described in terms that made the questioner feel small for asking practical questions about them. The idea this time was a luxury lifestyle brand. British-made products, sustainably sourced, with a brand identity that Connor described as, and I am quoting exactly, because I wrote it down after a Christmas dinner in which I sat through 45 minutes of this, the intersection of heritage craftsmanship and modern aspiration. The brand was called Harland and Moore. He had spent, by the time he announced this at Christmas dinner, 6 months and a significant portion of his savings on the brand identity. The logo, the website built by a digital agency in London that charged, I subsequently discovered, more per project than I earn in a quarter. The PR agency in Mayfair. The market research. The brand story, which was a document of 8 pages that I read once and which contained the phrase rooted in the quiet confidence of the British landscape 4 separate times. He told the family, additional investment capital to move into production. My mother at that Christmas dinner said, "We'll work something out, darling, we always do." I caught my father's eye across the table. He looked away first. I did not ask what "we'll work something out" meant. I should have. I understood later that not asking was a kind of complicity, not because it was my responsibility to police Connor's choices, but because I had already, by 38, trained myself to let certain conversations move past me without engaging them, because engaging them had historically produced nothing except the feeling that I had been unreasonable for engaging them. I said, "It sounds like you've done a lot of thinking about it." Connor said, "I have. This is the one, Soph, I can feel it." I smiled, ate my roast potato, thought about the 8-page document and the phrase about the British landscape and said nothing else. "Your brother is so brave," my mother said to me in the kitchen afterwards while we were doing the dishes. "Don't you think, to take a risk like that?" I said, "Brave is one word for it." She said, "You could be more supportive, you know? It's not easy doing something like this." I rinsed a plate, set it in the rack. I said, "It sounds like he's done a lot of thinking." I said, "That was supportive." She gave me a look, the particular look that means you know what I mean, and the thing she meant being be enthusiastic. In the way she is enthusiastic. In the unconditional, unexamining whatever he needs way. I was not able to be enthusiastic in that way. I was not built for it. And this was, as far as my mother was concerned, a character flaw. My grandmother, Nonna Ruth, died 18 months before Connor launched Harland and more. She died in her own house, in her own bed, with a view of her garden from the window. She was 83. She had lived the last year knowing it was the last year and had spent it with a clear-eyed pragmatism that I found both devastating and deeply admirable. She put her affairs in order. She wrote letters. She told people what she needed to tell them. She told me in October, 5 months before she died, that she wanted me to have the house. We were sitting in her garden, the end of a warm autumn afternoon, the apple trees doing the thing they do in October when the light goes amber and the air smells of damp leaves and everything feels both very beautiful and slightly elegiac. She had made tea, there were biscuits. She was wearing the green cardigan she wore almost every day, the one with the missing button she had never got round to replacing. She said, "I want you to know something about the house." I said I was listening. "It will go to your mother when I go, that's the will, and I'm not changing it, she's my daughter and that's right and proper. But I've written her a letter, I've told her what I want, and what I want is for it to be kept for you." I looked at her. "Not Connor," she said, in case I hadn't understood. She looked at me steadily. "You, Sophia, because you are the one who will take care of it. And because you are the one who has never had anything given to her and still built something worth having." I did not know what to say. She reached over and put her hand over mine. Her hands were small and very capable, the hands of a woman who had made things all her life. "I know your mother," she said. "I made your mother, which means I know what she does when Connor needs something. I've tried to make it as clear as I can in writing." I said, "She wouldn't." Nonna Ruth looked at me with a patience that was also a very specific kind of love. She didn't say anything. I drove home from Dorset that afternoon and told Jamie what had been said. He listened. He asked a few careful questions. Then he said, "What do you think will actually happen?" I said, "I think she means it, my grandmother. I think the letter is real." "And your mum?" I looked out the window at the motorway. "I think my mum will mean it too," I said. "Until Connor needs something." I was right. I just didn't know yet how completely I was right. If you have ever watched someone you love fail to protect something they promised to protect, not out of malice, but out of a particular kind of blindness that has a name, and the name is favoritism, leave a comment below. Just the word, same. That's all. Because you deserve to know you are not alone in this. Connor launched Harland and more in the spring of the year after Nonna Ruth died. He invited the family to the launch event. A venue in Soho, a converted warehouse, exposed brick, a catering team with good cheekbones and superior postures. There was champagne. There were leather goods displayed on wooden pedestals under warm lighting. There were candles that smelled, I will concede, genuinely excellent. There were approximately 40 people there who were not family. Jamie and I drove down. I wore something appropriate. Jamie wore a jacket he'd pressed specifically. We arrived, had champagne, looked at the leather goods, which were beautifully made if extremely expensive for what they were, and talked to the people Connor had arranged to talk to us, who were in PR or media or creative direction. A job title I encountered 4 times that evening without ever quite understanding what it referred to. Connor was in his element. He moved through the room with the absolute conviction of a man who has decided his moment has arrived. He was wearing a very good suit. He shook hands with everyone. He gave a speech that lasted 8 minutes and used the word heritage 5 times and the word intentional 7. My mother stood near the edge of the room beaming. Actually beaming. I have not, and I mean this sincerely, I have not seen my mother beam at anything I have ever done the way she beamed at Connor in that Soho warehouse. I drank my champagne and looked at the leather goods and thought, the margins on this don't work. The retail price is in the wrong bracket for the audience he's targeting. The candles are lovely, but the leather is competing with brands that have 50 years of heritage actually behind them rather than in front. I said none of this. It was not my business to say it. He had not asked. On the drive back to Stroud, Jamie said, "It's very beautiful, the stuff." "It is," I said. "Will it sell?" I looked at the motorway. At that price point to that market with that level of awareness? No, not enough, not sustainably. What would he need? A different strategy or significantly more capital to sustain losses while brand awareness builds? Probably both. How much capital? I thought about it. More than he has. Jamie was quiet for a moment. More than your mum has. I turned and looked at him. "Jamie, I'm just asking." "Don't," I said, "please." He dropped it. We drove in silence for a while. I watched the lights of the motorway and told myself, she wouldn't. She understands what the house means. She wrote her the letter. Nana Ruth understood what my mother would do. I knew in that car, in that silence, driving away from a very beautiful and financially incoherent launch party, that I was choosing not to understand it. Harland and Moore ran for 18 months. I know the timeline now because I have subsequently looked at everything. Not obsessively, thoroughly. There is a difference. When you find out that a significant financial decision has been made involving your interests without your knowledge, you develop a detailed and clear-eyed understanding of the sequence of events. Here is the sequence as I have reconstructed it. Month 3 of trading. Sales below projections. Connor approached the PR agency about a revised strategy. The revised strategy required additional budget. Month 6, a large wholesale order from a boutique buyer fell through. The brand was burning through cash. Connor began talking to my mother about his concerns. Month 8, my mother began quietly exploring the house. I want to stop there for a moment. Month 8, I was in Stroud. I was in the middle of a contract with a client in the West Midlands. I had just taken on a new member of the team. I was driving to Wiltshire for Sunday lunches and calling home twice a week and sending Connor encouraging texts about the brand when things came up on social media, because I am, even when I have doubts, fundamentally a supportive person. I was doing all of these things while my mother was having conversations with a solicitor that I did not know about. Month 9, she instructed the agent. She used the agent she knew from her own career and property because she trusted them. She has since told me she trusted them. Month 10, viewings. Month 11, an offer accepted. Month 12, I called home from a car park in Wolverhampton after a meeting and spoke to my mother for 20 minutes about nothing in particular. The garden, Connor's Instagram presence, which she had apparently been helping him manage. A neighbor's planning application, and she said nothing. Nothing. I want to stay with that for a moment. 20 minutes. We talked about a planning application in Wiltshire for a neighbor's extension. We talked about whether the garden needed the rose bushes cutting back before the frost. We talked about Connor's Instagram and the caption she had suggested for a product photo and whether it was the right tone for the brand. I offered a few thoughts on caption writing. I said the product photography looked beautiful and that keeping the copy direct would serve it better than going too lyrical. She thanked me for the advice. She was using my professional skills during a phone call I had called to have with my mother to refine the marketing presence of the business she had secretly liquidated my birthright to fund. I did not know this at the time. I learned it later, and then I went back over the conversation in my memory and felt the specific quality of that particular kind of sick. Month 13, completion. The solicitor finished. The funds transferred to Connor's business account. I found out in month 15, on a Wednesday, on a phone call I almost didn't answer. Connor needed it, Sophia. He was going to lose everything. I couldn't just let that happen. I was standing in the corridor outside the meeting room. Through the glass, I could see my client's finance director, the documents we had been working through. Everything I had built, solid and present and requiring my attention. I said, "Mum, that house was meant to come to me. Nana Ruth said so. She wrote you a letter." "The house was mine to do with as I chose," she said. "That was the will. I loved your grandmother and I know what she wanted, but Connor was in a very serious situation, Sophia. He could have lost his flat. He's got his whole life wrapped up in this business. He had options. He could have gone to the bank. He could have found investors. He tried those things. He didn't ask me. I'm a financial consultant. Did you think of that? Did either of you think of that? Silence. You would have told him it wouldn't work, she said. I closed my eyes. How much? I said. She told me. I will not give you the exact figure because some things I am choosing to keep between the people involved. But I will tell you that it was substantial. It was the kind of figure that, invested properly over 10 years, would have represented a meaningful security. The kind of security I have built for myself through my own work. But that would have meant something else, coming from Ruth's house. Coming from that kitchen table, and that October garden, and those apple trees. And did it work? I said. The business, did it survive? Another silence, longer this time. It's a difficult market, she said. He's pivoting, he's got some new ideas. Mum, did the business survive? He closed the brand last month, but I stopped listening. Not deliberately, not dramatically. I simply stopped. The way a machine stops when it has reached a particular state. When the thing it was processing has exceeded what it can process. I stood in the corridor for a moment, then I said, I have to go back to my meeting. She said, Sophia, please don't. I'll call you later. I went back to the meeting. I sat down. I resumed the conversation in the room with a professionalism that I am genuinely proud of because I had just been told something that had taken the floor out from under me, and I sat in that chair and delivered the advice my client was paying me for and did not show a single crack. Afterwards, I sat in my car in the car park for 45 minutes. I didn't cry, I thought about crying, but what I felt was not grief exactly. It was something older and colder, the feeling of a confirmation. The feeling of a thing you knew was true finally saying out loud, yes, you were right, this is exactly what you always suspected was true. I had not been seen, I had been managed. I had been the person who was fine, who didn't need anything, who was doing so well, and that assessment had been used, without anyone intending it cruelly, as permission to overlook me entirely when it mattered. I drove home. I pulled up outside the stone house in Stroud, sat in the car for a moment looking at it, the flagstones, the garden I had built up over 5 years, the kitchen light on because Jamie was home. I went inside. Jamie was at the kitchen table with a laptop and a glass of wine. He looked up. He did not say, how was your day or how did the meeting go? He looked at my face. What happened? I sat down. He poured me wine without being asked. I told him everything, all of it. The house, the solicitor, the timeline, the amount, the closed brand, the pivot, Connor's flat. The letter Nana Ruth had written that had apparently been received and read and filed somewhere and then not acted on. Jamie listened. He did not interrupt. He did not, to his enormous credit, say I told you so, not because he had told me so specifically, but because on the drive back from the launch party we had both understood. And we had both chosen not to say the thing we understood. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, what do you want to do? Not, I'll call Connor, not, we'll sort this out, not, she didn't mean it that way. Just, what do you want to do? I picked up my wine. I said, I want to stop pretending that this is a family where I am as valued as my brother, because it is not, and I am done performing otherwise. He nodded. Okay, he said. I don't know what that means yet, in practical terms. That's all right. We sat in the kitchen until it was late. At some point he made toast, which is what Jamie does when the situation is beyond resolution but requires something practical to hold onto. I ate the toast, stared at the table, thought about an October afternoon. Apple trees, a green cardigan with a missing button. A woman who had known exactly what would happen and tried to prevent it anyway. I thought she knew, and it happened anyway. And I thought, what am I going to do now? My father called the following morning. Not my mother, my father, which told me something immediately about how the previous evening had gone in Wiltshire. Dad Robert, Bob to nobody who valued the relationship, is not a complicated man in the way that some people use complicated to mean interesting. He is straightforward in the genuine sense. What he feels, he shows. What he thinks, he usually says eventually, given enough time and the right circumstances. He is not strategic. He had been married to a strategic woman for 43 years and had navigated this by being himself, entirely without strategy. He called at 8:30 in the morning. I was still in my dressing gown on my second coffee, staring at the garden. Your mum told me she'd spoken to you, he said. She did. Are you all right? Not especially, Dad, no. He made a sound, not a word, the sound a person makes when they have known something was wrong for a long time and have not said so, and the sound is the weight of that unsaid thing. Did you know? I said, pause. Not when it started, he said. I found out around month 10, after the offer was accepted. Did you say anything? I did. And your mother told me that Connor's need was immediate and real and that your grandmother's wishes were a guideline, not a binding instruction. I set my coffee down. A guideline, I said. I know. She wrote it in a letter, Dad, in her own handwriting. I know, love, I know that. His voice was tired. The particular tiredness of a man who has argued against something, lost, and been carrying the knowledge of that loss ever since. Why didn't you call me? I said. When it was happening, why didn't anyone tell me? A long pause. Because by the time I found out the offer was already accepted, it was done. And I thought telling you while it was in progress would only… Dad, I know I should have. You should have. We were quiet for a moment. I'm sorry, Sophia, he said. I am genuinely deeply sorry, not on your mom's behalf. She'll have to do that herself when she's ready, but for me, because I knew it was wrong and I did not fight hard enough for the right thing. I sat in my kitchen in Stroud and looked at the garden. I know, Dad, I said. I love you, you know that. I do know that. Your grandmother would be… He stopped, tried again. She'd be furious. Something tightened in my chest and then, unexpectedly loosened. Yeah, I said, she would. We talked for another 20 minutes. About nothing much. About the garden and his motorbikes and a documentary series he was watching. The normal things. The things that exist in parallel to the large and painful things and that keep the day going while the large and painful things are processed. When we hung up, I sat for a long time with the phone in my hand. My father had known, had disagreed, had not fought hard enough, had been carrying the weight of that. This did not absolve him. It did not make things right. But it was honest, and it was given without excuse, and it was, I had to acknowledge, more than I had expected. Some families are broken in ways that have a single cause. Some are broken in ways that have accumulated over decades, where fault distributes across multiple people in multiple moments. And the result is not one villain but a system, a way of operating that nobody designed but everybody contributed to. I was beginning to understand that my family was the second kind. That understanding was both harder and, in a strange way, more useful. I did not call Connor for 3 weeks. He called me twice, left one voicemail. In the voicemail he said, "Hey Soph, it's me. Mum said you two have been a bit… Look, I know it's not ideal, I know it's complicated, but I think if we could just have a chat." I listened to the voicemail twice. Then I called him back. We spoke for 34 minutes. I know the exact duration because I was watching the call timer throughout, the way you watch something that has a shape you want to understand. Connor said he was sorry. He said it 4 times. Each iteration of sorry was slightly different in emphasis, which told me he had thought about how to say it, which told me he knew it was serious, which was something. He said the business had been everything he'd hoped it would be. He just underestimated the market conditions. I said I would have told you that the market conditions were going to be the problem if you'd asked me. I know. I could have helped you build a more realistic financial model. That's what I do. I know, Soph, you didn't ask. No, why not? Pause, because I thought you'd tell me it wouldn't work. Mum said the same thing. I know. And was that worse than losing the money from Nana Ruth's house? Was the idea of hearing my analysis worse than this? He didn't answer for a long moment. I needed someone to believe in it, he said finally. Mum believed in it. I needed that. I thought about this for a long time after the call ended. Not angrily, analytically. The way I think about things when I need to understand them rather than simply feel about them. Connor had needed belief. My mother had provided it unconditionally, in the way she always had, in the way that had always been available to him regardless of what was being asked for belief in. And that belief, that unconditional fuel, had not been enough to make the business work. But it had been enough to make the decisions that led to the house being sold, which meant that the gift my grandmother had tried to leave me was spent on the experience of being unconditionally believed in. And the business that belief was applied to no longer existed. And I was not, in anyone's version of these events, a consideration. This was not new information. It was old information finally arrived at in its full and complete form. I did not take legal action. I want to be clear about this because some of you will be asking. I looked into it. I spoke to a solicitor. The letter Nana Ruth had written was not a legally binding document. It was an expression of intent, not an instruction with legal force. My mother had inherited the house outright. What she chose to do with it was legally her right. The solicitor was very clear and very sorry about this in the professional, measured way solicitors are sorry. So I did not take legal action. Not because there was nothing to feel wronged about, there was, but because the law had already spoken, and the conversation I needed to have was not with a court but with myself, about what I was willing to carry and what I was willing to put down. What I did instead, I reduced my contact with my mother from twice weekly calls to once weekly. When she asked why, and she asked, about 3 weeks in, with a concerned but slightly aggrieved quality that told me she had noticed and was waiting for me to apologize, I said, "I'm busy, Mum, things are fine." I stopped bringing food to family events. For years I had arrived at Sunday lunches and Christmas dinners with something I had made because making things is how I show love and also because I was very good at it. I stopped. I arrived on time. I sat down, I ate. My mother noticed this immediately and commented, "Nothing from the kitchen this time?" I said, "I ran out of time." She looked at me. I looked at her. Nothing else was said. I stopped asking about Connor's next venture, because there was already a next venture, had been announced within 6 weeks of Harland and More closing, a subscription wellness box which he described as the intersection of well-being and community. I listened to my mother describe it once over a Sunday lunch and said nothing. No questions, no investment, no further engagement. I kept having coffee with my father. Every time we were in the same place, he found a reason for the two of us to be in the same room for a while. Once it was an errand to a garden center. Once it was watching 20 minutes of a race together while everyone else was doing something else. He did not make speeches. He showed up in small, consistent ways. I accepted those small, consistent ways. Because they were honest, and because he was my father, and because I understood by then that the thing he hadn't done, fight hard enough, call me in time, came from a kind of conflict avoidance that had been his survival mechanism in this family for decades. And while that did not make it right, it made it comprehensible. And Jamie, who watched all of this and said almost nothing, who made toast when things were beyond resolution, who once very quietly said, "You know you don't have to manage this family's feelings as well as your own." I said, "I know." He raised his eyebrows. "I'm working on it," I said. He put his hand over mine and went back to reading. If you have been told, for the majority of your life, that you don't need as much because you are so capable, so independent, so sorted, that the very qualities you built to survive your family are used to justify your family giving you less, share this video. Because someone you know needs to hear that this has a name. It's called the competence penalty. And it's real. And it is not your fault. 6 months after the phone call in the corridor, there was a Sunday lunch. These things happen. You do not stop going to Sunday lunches because of family betrayal, mostly because then you are also declining the opportunity to see your father, and your father is someone you want to see. So you go, you manage. This one was in December. Cold, early dark. Wiltshire at the tail end of autumn, the trees stripped, the fields wet, the village quiet in that particular way English villages go quiet in winter, as though they have drawn in on themselves. Connor was there with his girlfriend, Priya, a perfectly pleasant woman who had recently been introduced to the family and who appeared to be handling the Connor experience with the calm of someone who had decided to see where it went. I liked her. I hoped for her sake that she was watching carefully. We were having pre-lunch drinks. My father was describing the documentary series he was watching, something about engineering disasters, which was exactly as appealing to me as it sounds. And Priya was asking interested questions, and Connor was on his phone, and my mother was moving between the kitchen and the dining room with the efficient energy of a woman conducting an operation. I was sitting near the window with a glass of wine and watching. Connor put his phone down, looked at me. "New project's going really well," he said. I looked at him. "Yeah, The subscription box. We've got 112 subscribers already, pre-launch. That's good, I said. I'm thinking of bringing in a business advisor, someone to help with the financial model. A pause, he held my gaze. I thought he is asking me without asking me. This is the Connor version of asking, where the actual request is present but deniable. I put my wine down on the side table. Connor, I said quietly, I will help you if you ask me directly and honestly and on terms that acknowledge what happened with the house. I am not going to pretend that the house didn't happen, and I'm not going to help you on the basis that we all agree to pretend it didn't. He blinked. I wasn't. I know, I said. Think about it. My mother appeared in the doorway with a dish. 5 minutes, she said. I picked up my wine and went to help carry things to the table. Because that is what I do, what I have always done. But I had said the thing. The first time I had said a true thing at a family event, directly to the person it needed to be said to without managing it into something smaller first. It felt, I will not pretend otherwise, extremely good. I had not expected anything to change. I had made my quiet adjustments and I was genuinely steadier for it, less performing, less managing, less rearranging myself into a shape that had never quite been my shape. Then, 4 months after the December Sunday lunch, a letter arrived. My mother's handwriting, posted from Wiltshire. A first-class stamp, slightly crooked. I stood in the hallway of the Stroud house and looked at it for a moment. Then I went to the kitchen, put the kettle on, sat down at the table. Jamie appeared from somewhere, looked at the envelope in my hand. From Mum. He sat down. I opened it. Dear Sophia, I have been trying to write this since November. I have started it 4 times and given up because I couldn't find the right way to say it, and I have now decided there probably isn't a right way, so I am just going to say it. The house was wrong. What I did was wrong. Your grandmother made her wishes clear, and I chose, when it came to it, to set those wishes aside. I told myself that circumstances were exceptional and that Connor's need was immediate and that you were resilient enough to absorb it. All of those things may be true and none of them make what I did right. I want to try to explain, not because explanation is the same as excuse, but because I think you deserve to understand what was actually happening in my head, even though what was happening in my head was not your responsibility to manage. I have always found you difficult to worry about. Not because you don't warrant worry, but because you have never, as far as I could see, needed it in ways I knew how to respond to. You built things, you sorted things. You were competent in ways I respected and also, if I'm honest, found intimidating. I didn't know how to help you. I knew how to help Connor, because Connor's needs were always clear and immediate and I understood them. That is not a reason to have done what I did. I know that. Your grandmother gave me the house because she trusted me. She wrote me a letter because she trusted me and also because she knew me well enough to know I needed the letter. She gave me both the trust and the safeguard because she loved me. And I failed the safeguard. I have thought about the December Sunday lunch many times since. You said you would help Connor if he asked you directly and honestly. You did not exclude him. You did not punish him. You said, come to me properly and I will be here. That is more generous than I would have been in your position. You got that quality from your grandmother. I am not asking you to forgive me. I think forgiveness is something that happens in its own time or doesn't happen. And I don't believe I get to ask for it on a schedule that suits me. I am asking you to know that I see what I did, and that I see you, properly. Perhaps later than I should have, and certainly later than you deserved, but clearly. You built Clearwater from nothing. You built a life in Stroud that is exactly what you wanted. You built a partnership with someone who genuinely knows what you are. You have never once expected the world to hand you things. I think I believed that meant you didn't need things handed to you. I understand now that it meant something different. It meant you had learned not to expect them, which is not the same at all. I am sorry, Sophia. With love, Mum. I read it once. Folded it, set it on the table. Jamie, who had been sitting across from me and who had not read it but had watched my face, said nothing. I made tea, sat back down, read it again. Then I put it in the drawer where I keep the things that matter. An old photograph of Nana Ruth at her market stall. The first check I deposited when Clearwater started trading. A postcard Jamie sent me from a work trip in the early months, before we were serious, in which he had written nothing except 3 words about a cathedral and a drawing of a very small boat. I did not call my mother that day. I sat in the kitchen for a long time. Jamie made dinner, we ate. He told me about something from his work, a project that was going well, a problem that had been solved. I listened and asked questions and was present. Later in bed in the dark, I thought about the letter. I thought about what it takes to write a thing like that. The 4 attempts she mentioned. The decision to send it without finding the right way because there wasn't a right way. I thought about Nana Ruth sitting in her garden in October, 5 months before she died, with her green cardigan and her capable hands, telling me, "Your mother will need this in writing because I know what she does when Connor needs something." She had known, and the worst had happened anyway. And now my mother had written her own letter, the one that came after, not the preventive one, but the reckoning one. Some letters arrive in time, some arrive after. Both kinds matter. I am 42 now. Clearwater Advisory has 14 retained clients. This past year was the best year we have had. Melissa made partner, which I celebrated more enthusiastically than I have celebrated most of my own achievements, because watching someone you helped develop reach a milestone is one of the specific pleasures of building something that is bigger than yourself. There was a moment, the afternoon Melissa signed the partnership documents, when she looked up from the papers and said, "You didn't have to structure it this way." I said, "What way?" "Fairly," she said. "You could have given me a smaller stake. Nobody would have said anything." I thought about that. About all the things nobody says anything about because the person it affects has been trained not to expect differently. "It's the right stake," I said. "You built this too." She nodded, signed her name, and we went to dinner at the place across from the office and drank wine that was better than the occasion technically required. Because some occasions deserve slightly better wine than technically required. Jamie's project, the flood prevention work, sustainable infrastructure across the Southwest, has entered its second major phase. He talks about it in the evenings with the focused satisfaction of a man doing work that matters. I find this still, after years of watching it, very moving. The work that makes cities more livable for people who never know they are being helped. There is something in that quality, the helpfulness that doesn't require credit, the contribution that isn't performed, that I have always found deeply admirable, and that I have spent my adult life trying to practice myself. We have not made any formal decisions about the future. What I know is that the house in Stroud is ours in the way that things are yours when you have chosen them and worked for them and built your life inside them. The garden, which I have spent 5 years coaxing into something that is both deliberate and gloriously unruly, is mine in every sense that matters. My father drives up to visit every few months. He and Jamie watch engineering documentaries together with the settled comfort of 2 people who have found an unexpected common language. He and I walk along the canal, through the lanes, wherever. We talk about his garden, my work, the way the light changes in the Cotswolds in winter, which we both agree is underrated. Once last spring, walking back along the towpath, he said without preamble, "You've built a good life, Soph." I said, "I have." "I'm glad," he said. "I'm very glad." And the conversation moved on to other things, which is the best kind of conversation. The kind that carries something important and then releases it without ringing it, without needing acknowledgement. My mother visits. It is different now, and I will not pretend the difference is insignificant or complete. Some things have been said that cannot be unsaid, and some things that were done cannot be undone, and the landscape of the relationship is changed. But it is not raised. We have dinner. We talk. There are still moments where she says something that finds the old bruise. Habit is a deep groove, but the bruise is smaller. And I no longer press on it to check whether it still hurts. It still hurts, sometimes. That is not the same as being defined by it. Connor is Connor. He called on my birthday. Left a voicemail that was warm and not quite apologetic. The Connor version of apologetic, present but deniable. I listened to it, made a note to call him back, and called him back the following week. We spoke for 12 minutes. Priya is still in the picture. The subscription box is ongoing and I do not ask about the numbers. He has not asked me for help since the December Sunday lunch, which may mean he doesn't need it or may mean he is still thinking about what I said. Either is fine with me. Priya sends me occasional messages. She is good people. I tell her things she needs to know carefully without editorializing. It is the least I can do, and Nana Ruth, who has been in this story from the beginning as she was in my life from the beginning. Ruth, who sold pottery and second-hand books, who gave a handshake that meant something, who sat in her garden in October and told a 9-year-old girl, good, don't let anyone talk you out of it, who knew her daughter and tried and could not prevent everything, but who wrote it down, who left what she could in writing, who trusted and was failed and would have been, as my father said, furious. I think about her sometimes in the garden here in Stroud. When the light goes low in autumn and the apple trees I planted, 3 of them along the back wall, because I needed apple trees in this garden, I did not entirely know why, do the thing that apple trees do in October. That low amber quality, that smell of damp leaves. I sit on the bench I moved into the corner last year, and I think about what she left me. Not the house, that is gone, and I have made peace with what that means and what I cannot change about it. Peace does not mean indifference. It means I have stopped turning it over like a stone I can't stop lifting, checking for something underneath that isn't going to be there. The house is gone. What was done was done. My mother has written a letter that took 4 attempts and arrived without a right way. My father carries a guilt that is his to carry. Connor is somewhere trying again. And I am here. What she left me was the knowledge that someone saw me. Early, clearly, without performance or qualification. She saw the 9-year-old who wanted to build something of her own and she said, good, and she built it into the structure of what she left behind. This is for you. This one has always been for you. The house is gone. That knowledge is not. I carry it in the way you carry things that are genuinely yours, not displayed, not performed, just present. Inside. There is a particular quality of becoming yourself that does not announce itself. It doesn't arrive with a speech or a resolution or any kind of dramatic turning point. It arrives the way the garden arrived, gradually, season by season, through attention and stubbornness and the decision to plant things even when you weren't sure they'd take. You look up one day and it has happened. I looked up. That October afternoon. The green cardigan. The missing button. Good. Don't let anyone talk you out of it. Here I am, Nana Ruth. I didn't let anyone talk me out of it. And that is, it turns out, quite a lot. If this stayed with you, the house, the November phone call, the letter that came after, hit subscribe and stay close. Because next week on her breaking point, I am bringing you the story of a woman who found out at her own retirement party that her company had quietly written her out of the equity she was owed. By the colleagues she had mentored. By the partners she had made. It starts with a toast. She gives it herself. And what she discovers during the applause will change everything that comes after. Don't miss it.